For the second half of the lecture on Chapter 6 in the Day and Shield text, we're going to look at what I'm calling the various philosophies about solutions to the problems of poverty during the first half of the 1800s in America. During this period of time, again, setting the stage here, some of the things that were going on socially was an emerging middle class as professions with skilled workers and merchants and small factory owners developed. And also, particularly in the West, small landowners were staking their claim and beginning to find some economic success in having done so. And for those individuals in the East who are having problems but did have the means to get West, the West really opened up a lot of economic opportunities. And there were some things done through the child saving movement that we'll be talking about eventually, including farming out children, which really aided the settlers by essentially sending young kids with them to do a lot of the work on the farms for them, and supposedly improving the condition of the children in the process. But when it came to the issues of poverty, the answer for this is, as I have obviously stated very clearly here, the answer for this was seen to be the reform of the individual. That was the answer to poverty. Economic growth and geographical expansion seemed to be the results of the efforts of individuals and the risk-taking of individuals, and so it kind of made sense to the reverse, that if you didn't have success and that was really just your fault because other people were being successful. If there were problems with humanity, it was believed that those problems could be fixed, and that one being successful really was all about self-determination. There was concerns about some of the social problems in the era, however, and there were some areas of reform activity that developed in this particular part of the American history. And I think I have 7 different areas of reform here. First, the abolition of slavery. Abolition, meaning the elimination of slavery, was really a hot political topic much throughout the early 1800s, and of course this set the stage for the eventual development of the Civil War, and it began in 1861. But throughout this period of time, there was a constant debate going on in Congress between the South and the North about the institution of slavery, and efforts were made to abolish slavery all over the United States during this era. For the South, however, that seemed to be essentially a bunch of Northerners who had industries established and resources close at hand to make those industries work. A bunch of Northerners with those resources available trying to overrun the South, which was by nature of the industries that had developed and by the nature of their climate and conditions around them, lived a much I think a poorer life. I think there was more poverty, and it was largely an agrarian economy, very large farms, and originally, you remember, it was established with indentured servants, and eventually slaves were brought in to replace the indentured servants, and so these large farms, plantations, were really run by large populations of slaves who were kept there because of the slavery the institution of slavery. And without slavery, the economy in the South would collapse, and so, at least as it stood in those days, and so this was why there was such a great resistance and struggle over the years around the issue of slavery. Another issue that was really kind of dawning during this period of time was suffrage for women. This is the right for women to vote. Barack Obama, in his second inaugural address, mentioned the Seneca Falls Convention in his when he was talking about equal opportunity, I believe, and Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 was the first time where there was an official gathering of women to discuss the plight of women and the conditions that women lived with, and to begin to address the issue of equal rights for women. Suffrage was one of those things that was seen, as an essential thing for women to get the vote, but was also something that was going to be very slow in coming. It was going to be, another 100 years before women could vote in America. Another big issue that was also a big women's issue was temperance. This was the emphasis on the connection of unemployment and pauperism to drinking. So temperance was the movement that was intended to eliminate drinking, and I believe the term teetotalers began during this period of time. You know, they wanted to outlaw alcohol, and again, largely it was women that were leading this campaign, and it wasn't very popular with men, but there was a big issue with domestic violence. It wasn't called domestic violence in those days, but wife beating and unemployment connected to poverty, or rather to alcoholism. And so employers as well were concerned about this because their employees weren't very productive because of drinking, and so they were supportive of women in their efforts to campaign for temperance and to the elimination of alcohol. And it was really kind of felt in those days that that was the proper thing for women to do. We'll be touching on this more a few times during the semester. Suffrage, however, this was, voting was that outside the home thing. It was the domain of men, and so women who were campaigning for the right to vote were seen as kind of dangerous and not very feminine, whereas the temperance movement was more acceptable for women in those eras as far as the general belief was concerned. There was a focus placed upon trying to find ways to provide more effective relief for the poor, humane treatment of the insane, rehabilitation of criminals, and child saving. And so really those last four categories all kind of fell into this focus of social welfare and poverty during this period of time, and the response, the way of resolving each of these areas during this period was considered to be institutional care and discipline, training, and education. Now we'll be moving forward on that topic here in a few slides. Here's a cartoon or an illustration, let's say, of something that came from a period piece during this era, I guess. That kind of looked at the effects of alcohol in the individual. And the interesting thing, under this arch, you see the woman and child, presumably the men's wife and children, kind of looking on woefully as the individual moves from a glass with a friend to a glass to keep the cold out, and just a little glass too much, and on and on and on through drunkenness and poverty, disease, desperation, crime, and death by suicide. And this was kind of the course that it was seen that alcohol was leading in individuals' lives in those days. It really was a big problem back then. Still a big problem. So what were believed to be the causes of poverty in this era? In 1833, Matthew Carey wrote that he believed that the increase of poverty was due to the working of the market economy that was becoming increasingly reliant on machines. He indicated manual labor succumbs in conflict with steam and water power, and everything that supersedes the demand for that labor must increase competition, lowering wages and producing distress. So basically he saw the Industrial Revolution as changing the work site and eliminating jobs and eliminating opportunities for individuals to make a living. And so with fewer jobs, more competition, with more competition, lower wages, with lower wages, more economic problems, more poverty. So he clearly tied this to the economic system and the changes in the social revolution that were going on during this period. But most still believe that the causes of poverty were due to the individual character and the flaws in that character. And actually, the charitable organizations were seen as contributing to the problem. In fact, even earlier in this period of time, in 1818, the first annual report of the New York Society for the Prevention of Pauperism being, poverty, said that there were four causes of poverty. They were ignorance, lack of education, I assume, idleness, laziness, intemperance, drunkenness, imprudence. This would include foolish decisions and those kinds of things, gambling basically. Okay, aggravating poverty. These are things that didn't cause poverty but made it worse. were lotteries, gambling, pawnbrokers, houses of ill fame, that's prostitution, and charitable institutions. And so there you have it, human services workers and social workers right in there with prostitutes and gambling institutions, as causing poverty. Our profession wasn't seen, well, it wasn't a profession in those days, but people who were trying to help the poor weren't really viewed very favorably in those days. And again, there's still some carryovers in that, I think, in the popular beliefs today. It was believed that giving and taking help encouraged idleness and extravagance on the part of the poor. How many times do you hear people complaining about seeing somebody in the grocery line buying steaks and smoking cigarettes? Same complaint. Same complaint. And that it diminished the desire of the poor to work. Again, you hear oftentimes how individuals believe that the social welfare system tells people they don't have to work. In fact, that they should make more babies so that they get more money. Same philosophy. So this friendly advice that we talked about from the friendly visitors with the AICPs, the idea was to kind of encourage and counsel people away from these things to remediate poverty. Outdoor relief, if you remember, outdoor relief was where you provide direct assistance, money and food and those things to individual. Those things to individuals. Outdoor relief was seen as encouraging and perpetuating poverty, and again, it's the same thing we hear today about public assistance programs encouraging people to not work. So the answer to poverty was seen because poverty was the result of individual failure. It was believed the answer was almshouses, workhouses, and apprenticeships. Institutional care of people who were unemployed, who were needy. Institutional care of children, getting children away from their homes. Now, almshouses, as they developed during this period of time, many of them really didn't have many resources behind them, and very, very deplorable conditions developed in them. And so around the middle of the century, the whole notion of almshouses was reevaluated, and there were recommendations made to separate the worthy and the unworthy poor. This is the aged, disabled, and blind, and actually taking the worthy poor and providing them with outdoor relief, direct assistance, and providing institutional care for children and the insane, those kind of more or less impotent people that could not care for themselves because of their age or because of mental problems, and then the care of the able-bodied poor basically would continue to be almshouses in their terrible conditions. These are three themes that are very important, and I want you to keep this slide handy or write these things down. Remember these things. This is another piece that really ties very, very closely to the thinking of the present day, and I would like for you to kind of consider this and how it connects to today, just like that article that you read on America in 1848 relates to today. This is from another text. This is not from your author, and so you won't find this in your book. Three major themes of this era in regards to social welfare was that the causes of poverty were outside the economic system, despite what Thomas Paine said or believed, or what Matthew Carey wrote about. It was believed that poverty could be abolished by reforming the individual. We didn't need to change the system. Reform the individual. Secondly, institutions were the best way to do that. They could provide for the rehabilitation of the individual, and through that, the social order could be improved. So institutions were the answer, not direct assistance. Finally, the third theme was that social welfare programming was not the responsibility of the federal government, just like President Pierce said when he vetoed the 10 Million Acre Act. Not the responsibility of the federal government, but was a local, public, and voluntary concern. That really kind of hearkening back to those English poor laws and that whole philosophy. And so again, the three major themes of the era as far as poverty is concerned and its solution. The cause of poverty was the individual fault. Institutions were the best way to resolve the individual fault. and the feds had no role, the federal government had no role in providing for social welfare programming. And so in closing this second and last half of this week's lecture, look at some of these themes that you see here in this on this slide, and ask yourself if these themes of the early 1800s are still reflected in our society today. Are these kinds of things that you hear about? Drinking, drugs, extravagance of the poor. I think there, is one time or another, there's always some bill being introduced or something on Facebook about drug testing for the people that are on public assistance, blaming the individual and tying drugs into making that the reason for poverty. May have something to do with it, but it isn't the cause of poverty, as we'll see as the semester goes along. Giving help encourages laziness, individual fault, institutions are the answer, don't turn to government. These are all themes that we hear day in and day out in our thinking. These are themes that are 150 and 200 years old. It's not modern thinking. So, with that, we'll close the lecture for this week, and if you have questions or lingering concerns, please contact me and let me know. Otherwise, I'll talk with you again next week. Thanks.